everybody. Welcome back to another webinar here at Route Consultant, focusing on the EMS industry. And my name is Josh Gregory, if you've never been here before. And really, I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. And what that means for you is that I've been in and out of this industry for years on the logistics side and seen all the different kinds of ways that this can go. And really what I'm here to do is help provide a new opportunity and kind of give some education on the emergency medical services space. Now, these webinars are a place for you to continue to come, to learn, to ask questions. And so we will have time at the end of the webinar where if you have any questions throughout while I'm talking today, you can submit those and we will answer them at the end. Those do come in, or the best place to put that is at the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. Now, you may not be watching this live, you may be watching on YouTube later. And if that is the case, still feel free to send your questions over to us. You can send it straight to info@routeconsultant.com. We're always happy to answer whatever comes up. Or if you're watching on YouTube now, feel free to join us next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central for our next webinar where you can ask these live. Now, if you've been here for the last few weeks, really, we've kind of covered a whole bunch of different things in the space. And if you haven't watched those, feel free to go back. But what we've spent some time on recently is really how to find the right people to build relationships with to grow your business. So we're talking people like your social workers, your hospitals that you want to work with to build those relationships and how to market to them and how to secure that business. But what we haven't talked as much about is actually probably the most important part, which are the actual people that you're transporting. You know, what are the best types of clients and patients to find? What are the challenges with different types? And how do you prioritize these different types of clients? So we're going to talk through that and really understanding that kind of very important part of your business in this space. And so it'll be both myself and Hans Fakir who will be on. And if you haven't been to any of these, haven't gotten the chance to meet or talk with Hans, he has been in this industry for years, both started his own business and is now helping others grow and expand their own businesses and mentoring them in the space. So Hans, if you want to go ahead and come on and say hi to everybody, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am great. I'm great. I'm excited as always.
Perfect. So I think let's kind of start by clearing up a misconception that I'm sure a lot of people have. If you're in one of these ambulances, if this is your business, do you only service emergency 911 clients?
No, and that is a great question. Yes, the answer is no. And I think the daunting or scary thing is when you tell someone that they can start an ambulance company. Of course, you're going to easily assume that, oh, wow, I'm going to have to do 911 and I have to hire medics. And no, I've done this since 2015 and I've never ran one 911 call. Not saying I wouldn't, I just don't
Knock on
market to
wood
those
there, right?
clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, you don't, not at all.
Yeah, and that was when I first heard about the space, that was my immediate thought is, that sounds like a lot of risk, a lot of liability, dealing with really serious injuries and trying to make sure that they get there on time and dealing with all kinds of complications that come from it. So for me, that was an immediate relief the first time I heard it of, okay, that's great. But then kind of the follow-up thought and the follow-up question is, if it's not them, who are my clients? What are the different clients that you typically work with?
Yeah. Uh, Again, the clients that we work with are clients that just can't walk, right? They might have a minor medical issue that allows them to be non-ambulatory or can't walk, and they need assistance getting to a doctor's appointment or their scheduled routine dialysis, urgent care. We're dealing with people that have a medical issue, probably not going to be solved overnight, something that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. And they have to find a way to get transported to these very important doctor appointments or procedures. So that's what we do. Now, we have everything on the ambulance, like your local fire departments and hospitals. We just do not cater to those clients.
Yeah, gotcha. You're prepared for an emergency if you had to, but that is not the explicit goal of those ambulances.
Exactly.
Now, when I first am kind of thinking about this, I would have just thought that hospitals would have done that for their patients. Are there any of the hospitals that do it, or is this all done by independent providers like yourself?
No, there are private, like Georgia has Grady, which is the largest hospital in the state of Georgia. They have their own EMS system. They have, 911 calls and they dispatch right there. Now, there are private ambulance companies like myself, we run backup for them
Mm.
and they'll give us all their BLS calls, right? But there are hospitals, to answer your question, that have their own dedicated EMS service for the hospital.
Got it. So there's
Yeah.
some of those, but a lot of the gap is filled by individual companies like yourself. Got it.
Yeah, and you'll get probably one or two within a state, but how many hospitals are there that don't have it, right? And so there are a lot of people like myself that will, do discharges for those hospitals that are having problem clearing out their emergency rooms because they've already discharged the patient, but the patient can't walk and they have no way of getting home or going to you know, a nursing home or wherever they're going. So that's where we come into play.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that. If you're thinking though, if you had to say, what's my number one client, what's the number one type of patient that I always go for, what would you say?
I would always say, and I think, just dialysis, and that's just because of the consistency, right? The way I started my company, I built my company on dialysis, right? We've had patients for 8 years. So you want the patients that are there for the long run, right? Longevity. And now you know that you can build on top of that. So just my experience and what I've seen beneficial for other EMS owners, you want to start your company with the consistent patients, and you're going to find those patients at dialysis centers or wound cares, right? Where they have to go 3 times a week for a minimum of 3 months, 6 months, or dialysis for the rest of their lives until they get a kidney transplant. So you're going to market to those patients so that way you could build the consistency in your revenue.
Got it. And it's kind of a morbid question, but how often or how long can you kind of expect to have one of those patients?
That's a great question. And I look at, the age, the patient's health.
Mhm.
My dad was on dialysis for 15 years.
Yeah.
That is unheard of, you know, but he was very strict with his diet. With dialysis patients, I think they're only allowed to drink less than 20 ounces of fluid a day.
Oh, wow. I was
Yes.
not aware.
Yeah.
That's
So,
rough.
and then you have to look at getting a patient that probably doesn't go to dialysis frequently. He calls out or she calls out. So they're shortening their lifespan, right? Because every time you miss a dialysis treatment, you can, statistically, you're shortening your lifespan. So you can get a dialysis patient that's in his 30s, and you might have that patient for 10 years, probably, or you could get a patient. My father was 55, I think, when he got on dialysis, and he passed away at 71.
Yeah.
So that, like, so it can range just depending on that individual, how they take care of themselves, the support they get from their family members, the community, and what pushes them and make them thrive on living longer.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is something that, at the end of the day, it should be at least a few years kind of on the lowest end, even if somebody's really not taking care of themselves. So it's why it's such a consistent kind of patient type to look at. One, you're probably going to have them for a number of years, 15 years maybe, and they have to go, what, 3 times a week?
3 times a week. And that's why a lot of people will target dialysis patients, right? Because on the average, even in Georgia's probably per Medicare one of the lower paying states, but on the average Medicare rates with only 20 patients, there are over 11 million people in the state of Georgia. All I need is 20 patients to average 115 or over 100,000 in my gross, income revenue.
Yeah.
So you're gonna target that, and then you're gonna build on top of that. Because if I tell you, Josh, we're gonna get you to 20 patients, that's gonna bring your revenue of 100K a month.
Yeah.
Everything else is icing on the cake.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll talk about some of that icing today, but
Yeah.
outside of dialysis, is there any type of patient that you kind of think falls into a similar ballpark of consistency, kind of worth targeting like that?
Wound care,
Okay.
wound care. You're looking at patients that are sometimes on dialysis or they just have a disability or illness that does not heal quickly,
Okay.
right? So a lot of times, and wound care patients are so vital because you know that they are laying down most of the time, and most of the wounds will be on their backside. And so you're going to have that patient. I had a wound care patient for 5 years,
Hmm.
twice a week.
Okay.
And, and um and that's a great example, right? Because they're going to this facility, they're going to the hyperbaric chamber to try to get this wound to heal that will not heal. And so it's not going to be the regular procedure where you're going to patch it up and send them home. They literally have an illness that's preventing any wound from healing. So you're taking that patient maybe twice a week. So that's been a huge, consistent bed for me to find patients in.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I want to make sure we pause for a second just to kind of address like we are going to talk about the fact that it's great for your business that you get to work with someone who has to go to the hospital for a decade and go multiple times a week. That is not to say, that we're just gonna you can't just think of this as like a number crunching. They get to go to the hospital more, so they're worth more to me. It's really thinking about the fact that these are people that have such medical conditions where they have to go this often. And if somebody doesn't take them, they might just make that decision to not go or to skip it and shorten their life, lower their quality of life. So this is a really important part of the medical industry that yes, it is. These are the types of patients to target from a profitability standpoint, but you're also serving a really important need for these people that cannot function, cannot live their lives if they don't have somebody that can take them to and from these types of hospitals.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that point up, Josh. And that is so important. That's the reason why I got in this business. You know, you don't look at the financial aspect, you look at the impact that you play in their lives. But that you said it perfectly, and I hope people pay attention to that because that is really why we do what we do. The money will come, but again, you are so important to these people, and you become part of their family dynamic and their everyday lifestyle. So yeah, I'm very glad that you touched on that.
Yeah, because when we talk numbers, I just never want it to feel like that is what the only thing we're talking about. I can do that when I'm talking about people moving boxes, but when I'm
Yeah.
talking about, taking people through to, really sensitive and serious appointments like this, I think it's always worth kind of making sure everybody remembers and comes back to, like we've talked about before, come back to kind of your why for why you did it. It's like you said, why you got into this industry.
Yep. And one thing is I want people to pay attention to is the public is not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
They're not going to know the difference between your private ambulance company and the fire department. So they're going to treat you as such. So Josh will be at Chick-fil-A and someone's going to walk up to you and say, "Thank you for your service." And so you got to understand that even in the public eye, they understand the importance of what we do. And I hope people take that into perspective when they're thinking about getting into this business.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned another type of patient. You mentioned hospital discharges. So is that something that is kind of worth adding to your client pool? Is that something, that you should always have? Is it hard to get? Are they profitable? Kind of talk me through what those are like.
I think it's a great thing to do once you've created a system and you've really streamlined your company, your systems, right? You have systems in place to take care of your scheduled patients. And you might have those firefighters or those part-time employees that you can put on a second truck. So there's a lot of other things logistically you want to make sure you have in place before going after a discharge because you can literally have a truck sitting at a hospital parking lot for 2 hours waiting for someone to get discharged. So not only do you want to make sure that you have the capital to fund this, you want to make sure you're in a good financial place, but you want to make sure you have the right contracts in place with that hospital. You want to make sure that you have the right billing company in place because you can go run a hospital discharge, Josh, but if your billing company is not responding to you in time to make sure that that patient insurance will pay for this, you just gave someone a free ride,
Yeah.
right? So you want to make sure that your response time with your billing company should be no more than 5 minutes so you can call the hospital back and say, yes, I'll accept this patient. if you don't have that in place, or if you don't have that in place, you want to make sure you have the right contract with the hospital to make sure that if the insurance does not pay, then they're going to reimburse you. Because that can be very costly if you're taking hundreds of patients and you're not getting reimbursed for that.
Yeah.
But if you do have those contracts in place, if you do have the billing company in place to make sure that they can respond timely, then the discharges are great, especially if you have spare trucks that are sitting.
Yeah.
So you have employees that want to work overtime and you have a contract with the local hospital, you put that truck up every day because you're going to make money off of it.
Got it. And so those contracts, are they hard to get? Is it something? Okay.
No, not at all, because hospitals get paid to get the patients in the ER, get them fixed, and send them on their way, right? And so the longer they have a patient occupying a room that's already been discharged, the less money they make. So they'll be more than happy to have two or three contracts with,
Yeah.
three different vendors,
Yeah.
providers to make sure that that hospital stays, turning over patients.
Got it. Okay. Now, you've talked about all these different patients, and I think there's lots of different ways to target and market to and find these clients. What would you say is kind of the best way to do it? And are there any things that you think people often overlook there?
Yeah, definitely. The best way one of the ways that I found to just be successful for me and a lot of other people, of course, is the face to face, right? You want people to put a face with your company, and you want to at least get a few minutes to explain to people what's going to differentiate you from everybody else. So I think just face to face is great. It's worked for me throughout my years. But what I learned was, and I didn't put value in this particular uh, process until later on, was my website. Like, I just put up a website and I was like, first responders, EMS, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But then when I realized that people were really calling and asking, what services do you provide? And the website is so key for the general public that
Mm.
wants to transport mom and dad, right? Because they're not going through the social worker, so they don't even know to call a social worker to schedule your appointment. They're doing the Google search themselves. And I think if more people put more emphasis on their website, making it look professional, detailing every service they provide, from your basic transport to your more complex transport, to even saying that you do out of state transports. Somebody's always looking for transportation. And if you do not have that information on your website, you're missing a lot of, potential money.
Yeah. Yeah. If they can't find you, then they're not going to use you.
Yeah. And I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I'm sure that's the case, and I'm sure you're right that there's probably tons of people that know that face to face works and that's the way they do it, but have just completely missed the boat on the other types of mediums that you need to have to make sure that both patients and their family members and social workers can all find you online too.
yeah, and I've talked to so many people that have ambulance companies. They're like, no, I just got a website. I'm like, but you don't put what you do. And
Yeah.
I've talked to people that say I make X amount of thousands of dollars from people looking me up online.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh my God, I got to start doing this. And that's when 2 years in, I had to revamp my website and I added surveys on there. And so people can see, the type of service we provide. So that played a huge part of my success for people just doing a Google search. And if you do it right, you have the right SEOs in place. Then if somebody just Googles EMS or transportation or non-emergency, if you pop up, then hey, you never know. And the great thing that I almost forgot to say is that website patient might turn out to be a consistent patient
Mm.
that you did not even pay attention to. And I can't say his name because I thought to say his name.
Yeah.
Like Mr.
So yeah.
But yeah, his family Googled us or Google EMS. They found our website. They loved how professional it was and everything. And they looked at the reviews, not surveys. I apologize. The reviews. And we ended up transporting their son for years.
Mm.
And it was just because of what, and we would have missed that, if we just did the regular, hey, a two-page website, just so we could show people we have something now. And we actually incorporated where employees can actually go on our website and fill out applications right there. So as we grew, our website became more user-friendly and more detailed.
Yeah, and I know, thinking about my own life, if I was going to put my mom in a vehicle or my wife or anything, I would want to know everything I possibly could about the company before I call them and trust them. So, yes, I'd want to meet in person, but yes, I'd like to hear from other people too. So those like a review face to face, I think they're all important because this is not just a good that doesn't have any meaning to anyone. This is a family member, this is a friend that you care a lot about and you really want to make sure is the right fit, the right person to take care of them. Even if it's only for 30-minute drive, I want to make sure that 30 minutes is as safe and I trust it as much as possible. So I completely get that.
Yeah. My movie contract that I got with when the Avengers were filming
Mhm.
was through my website.
Yep. Yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me at all. Movie company, I'm sure when they're kind of corporately sourcing those types of things, they're going to use the internet. They're less likely to just, go to the person they
Yeah.
know on the street.
Yeah. Yeah. They're definitely not going to call a social worker. They don't even know to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. So it was definitely the websites are imperative to my success.
Yeah.
So
So we know our scheduled clients, we know that that's going to be the core of your revenue. What's kind of a threshold or a point that you think about where once I've got enough of these clients, I can start expanding to different other avenues of revenue?
the way I started my business, I just really focused on dialysis, right? I didn't look left, I didn't look right.
Mhm.
I actually went around and spoke to social workers, and I just made sure that I wanted to know what the need was. What's the main problem you have with transportation? And once I figured that out, or figured out how to create a system that can cater to the need or fix the need, then I started looking. So when I got to about 22 patients, we had very little call outs. We had people on standby. We had enough capital to pay overtime. That's when I said, okay, we've mastered this section of healthcare transportation. Now we can entertain the wound care, the hospice, the hyperbaric chamber, the events. And then that was actually used as a bonus or an incentive for my employees that were showing up on time, that had very little call outs. And that was the, hey, $25 an hour to do Black Panther, you know, or to do a parade. And so because we mastered something, we actually used, like we said before, the icing on the cake as incentives to even grow, become more profitable, but actually just to help my employees out as well.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think some of it's probably also going to be a comfort level. There's probably people who decide that they just want to stick to the things they know and they don't want to expand at all. There's probably people who try to expand too quickly. So I think kind of hearing your story of I got the core, I got up to 22. That was kind of the threshold where I felt comfortable and started expanding to hear that story and think through it for themselves.
Yeah. And one thing also is Josh is like, and I think that's why I love dialysis, because if you have the same, let's say you and I are, you're a medic and I'm a medic, and we're on the same route for the next 2 years. Well, we know the same patients, and I could always depend on Josh and Hans because I know they're going to be here at 4:30 in the morning. And so that freedom allows you
Yeah.
the flexibility to look at other business opportunities because I know Josh and Hans is going to be there. They're going to pick up Mr. Johnson, Mr. They have their routes. These employees know their routes like the back of their hand after a few,
Mhm.
after going on it so many times. So again, once you get into that comfort zone and everybody knows what to do and your company's just running by itself, I think that's a great time to explore other options.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now this is probably maybe a complicated question, but when you're thinking about these different clients, and thinking about how they pay you, are all insurances from these clients going to pay the same? Are they all created equal?
No, no, definitely not. Great question. I just got off the phone with one of my colleagues in Philly, and they were at a Medicare or Medicaid compensation. Medicaid pays right now like $1 a mile, I think. No, $5 a mile. I apologize. In Georgia. In Pennsylvania, they just approved to get paid $13 per mile. So please make sure that whatever state you look at, I might move to Pennsylvania. I mean, goodness gracious. Like $13 a mile, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
But every state is different, right? So I heard other states pay 278 dollars per trip.
Hmm.
So no, it's not a one size fits all. And if you have commercial insurance like your Blue Cross, your Aetnas, they definitely always pay more than Medicare.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. You don't want to, you know, uh, lose any money or anything like that. You want to make sure that you account for everything that's supposed to get paid to you. So you want to pay attention to what type of insurance your patient has and how much are they paying, and is it worth you transporting that patient?
Got
And
it.
you also want to make sure that, and they have they either do or do not have deductibles or out of pockets. So you can start an ambulance company, Josh, and you pick up two patients from a social worker. Well, it's not her job to tell you, hey, the two patients I just referred to you have a $5,000 deductible and a $10,000 deductible that have not been met yet. So now you have to make sure that you and your team, is this worth our while? Can we afford to ride this patient or transport this patient until that deductible's been met? And usually with situations like that, maybe a month of transporting that patient, and then again, you start making money on that patient. But that's where you'll account to looking at the patient's age, health, a lot of other factors that we can talk about later on. But again, you want to pay attention to the type of insurance they have, what that insurance is paying your particular state, because every state has a different fee schedule.
Got it. So you get these clients suggested to you by a social worker. Are there criteria where you'll say no?
Yeah. If I have, and I hate this,
Yeah. I mean, I
if
think it's important for people to kind of think it through for themselves too.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a perfect scenario. If you have an 85, 80-year-old patient and you do the evaluation, you can
Yeah.
always tell the social worker, I'm going to go evaluate. I have a team of two, and they'll go to the house and evaluate the patient. We want to make sure that that patient truly cannot walk or
Yeah.
truly needs our assistance, right? We want to make sure we're doing everything by the rules. But also, if the patient does have, like, let's say a $10,000 deductible, and it's the middle of November,
Mm,
right? Because I'm looking at the time too, and it's a frail older patient, right? 80 years old. Well, if the deductible or the out of pocket has not been met, then that means if you get the patient in November and you do the math and say, okay, it's going to take me 2 months to eat up this deductible. Well, guess what happens? In January, that deductible re-ups. So you're technically taking that patient for 4 months
mhm,
without getting paid. I will still do it if that patient fits right in my schedule.
mm.
Meaning that I'm already eating up 10,000, but do I have to call a crew in to come in early, or do I have to pay a crew to stay later? I factor in those things as well,
Got it.
right? But someone like yourself that's on dialysis or car accident, motorcycle accident, I know you're a healthy 35-year-old, I don't want to say age, but you're, 32, 33-year-old person. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have you for a while. So I'm going to definitely take you no matter what your deductible is.
Got it. Okay. Now, in those scenarios, you've decided for any number of reasons not to take the client. Is that something that the social workers understand, or does that really hurt the relationship when you turn them down?
I just think it's how you say it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Josh, I can't take this patient right now. We don't have the capacity financially to assume the deductible. I'll word it in a way like that. And patients or social workers will respect that more than you taking the client and later on realizing this is too much of a financial burden. And now you're giving the client back to the social worker, which gives he or
Yeah.
she more work to do.
Yeah.
So let me just tell them now, and I'm going to do the numbers. I've done this for so long. I'm doing the numbers. I'm checking the patient's health. I'm looking at their medical history. I'm like, and sometimes I'll do a pro bono until they find someone.
Yep.
But you take the Hans Fakir now compared to the Hans Fakir in 2015. When I was first starting, you could have a $30,000 deductible. I'm taking you. I needed to get my foot in the door,
Yeah.
and that helped because I would also explain that to the social workers. Look, Josh, this patient you gave me has a $5,000 deductible, but I want to start a relationship with you. And
Yeah.
I'm going to take this patient and I'm going to eat this, deductible. And hopefully I gain your trust and you send me more clients. Social workers love that because you make their job easier.
Yeah. I think that's really important is communicating the why for when you're saying no. But I think that's a great call out is that for a lot of people, when they're starting, it may be worth it to take these patients. But if you're going to take a patient that may not be perfect profitably, make sure you are explaining and mentioning that to the social worker so that you at least get some social capital if you're not
Yeah,
profit.
I like
Yeah.
that,
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, call it out. Like, you're doing them a favor. Make sure they know it.
Yeah. I would tell social workers everything, and I never try to squeeze a patient, you
Yeah.
know. And that's the great thing about building alliances with different ambulances. I know we're going a little left, but I always will say, hey, you know what? I know a guy in Nashville named Josh. He can take this patient probably. Let me check with you. Whatever you can do to make that social worker's life easier, they love it. Now, I just stopped her from having to get on the phone with five other providers. I'm going to do that work for her. She's going to find value in that I'm not trying to squeeze a patient into my schedule. And now she might, it might cause the patient to be late. I'm actually helping her out. And that's always worked for me as far as getting more referrals.
Yeah. I think that's a great call out. Now, just kind of for everybody, you mentioned having a bunch of different services. What are the different services you may kind of list that everybody should try to list? And what are ones that you think maybe not everybody does, or you might want to call out there?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, we talked about the main one, dialysis. We talked about the wound cares. We haven't really mentioned hyperbaric chamber. We haven't mentioned bariatric for your obese patients,
Yeah.
right? Hospice, cosmetic surgery patients, hospital discharges, nursing homes, assisted living facilities. I hope people are writing these things down because these are
Yeah.
all places that you want to market to. Assisted living facilities. Definitely, you want to go to your local state office and see what events are happening. You want to put your name on the vendors list. You want to go to any place that they do concerts, concert halls, and you want to put your name on the vendor list. Geez, there's so much. Uh, Funeral homes, we talked about that in the past. And one place that we haven't mentioned is mental health facilities.
Hmm.
And that's the 1013.
Okay. So what's a 1013?
1013 is somebody who's having a mental uh, instability moment, someone who has to get uh, Baker acted to the hospital. So someone who's having a certain I'm at a loss for it, not outbreak, but uh, just a behavioral.
Got it. A
Uh,
mental event for of some kind.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the great thing about 1013s are they can be classified as a 911 call for BLS. So you're going to get paid substantially more than you would for most of your other calls.
Got it. Okay. So you do get paid more if an emergency does happen.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And are those ever ones that you turn down? I know emergencies aren't always, the things that you're targeting, but for these 1013, the mental health event, are there different things you kind of have to you train your guys on that might make it where you're not always interested in taking those or anything to worry about there?
Yeah, I'm always looking at staffing. I'm looking at if I have a young person that's on my ambulance, frail type, I'm
Yeah.
going to always protect my employees. So um, there's certain guys that I know, firefighter guys that are on my crew, and they love taking those calls. And there's some people that, it's not for them. Maybe I have a medic that's a mother of three, and you want to protect her, or a young guy who's just really not into taking those calls. And that's definitely when I do my evaluation or my interview with my employees, I'll ask them, hey, are you opposed to taking these calls? And I create a roster. I have a disaster relief roster for anybody who's ready to go out of state. And I have my mental health roster for anybody who wants to get on that ambulance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out for when you're thinking about onboarding and when you're bringing on and evaluating your team is if you're trying to get into any of these other industries, make sure you got drivers that'll do it instead of just
Yeah,
on your website and telling social workers you'll do it and telling, I'll do disaster relief and then no one has to do it. Only way you can have that if you don't have any drivers that'll do it is you got to be willing to do it yourself. So if you're
yeah.
willing to do it, sure, you can always list it, but I think it's a better idea to make sure you're asking all your employees what are you open to? What are you not? Let me make sure this is an opportunity and that's something I can take advantage of and find that revenue stream.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities that you can evaluate what you're going to take and you can make sure that your employees are on board because without your employees it's not going to work. So you don't want to force them to do anything. I had an opportunity to do discharges, not discharges. Oh, that's a bad word, but kind of discharges from the hospital, but going to the morgue.
Mm,
Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
my employer was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I had to turn the contract down,
yeah.
because I'm not going to put the dollar over my employees' well-being, mental health, whatever. So, you definitely want to do that when you're onboarding and list all the things that all the services you might possibly provide and see if your employees are okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. Even if you don't provide it now, it's better to ask and find out if somebody's interested in it and figure out if it's something you can pursue in the future, as opposed to figuring it out after the fact and then finding out none of your employees will do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, I think that really kind of encapsulates and covers everything that we wanted to hit here, where there are key patients that are consistent and should be the majority of your revenue and your kind of your patient and list. And dialysis is a great one, wound care, anything that has consistency and longevity. So, they're going to go multiple times a week and hopefully will last, 5, 10 years or longer. That's kind of the best core patient list to use. And then beyond that, there's lots of other different industries you should get into. And if you're getting into those, make sure you're marketing and advertising so that people can find you and that you've got employees that are willing to do it.
Yeah.
And I think another really important point that you hit on today, Hans, is that even just because you know the type of wound they have and the type of medical event they have doesn't mean that they're always going to be the right client for you. There's different criteria you should think through around their insurances, the deductibles, the age of the client that might make them the wrong fit for your business, and knowing that it's okay to say no, but you have to understand how to have that conversation with social workers. I think all of that is really important as people are thinking through how to target the right client and build out their patient list from day one.
Well
So
said.
yeah, so if anyone has any questions, this is your chance to put it in the Q&A while I get to my kind of last part of the spiel here. For everybody who's on, everybody who's watching later, as a reminder, we've got free content you can always go on our website and see, and we've got weeks and weeks of webinars you can go see on YouTube. But also, if you're really interested in the space and trying to find that next step, next week in our offices in Nashville, we are having an on-site summit where it's a place for you to come, make sure you've got all of your foundation set and really decide that it's the right fit for you as you're getting into this industry, and also meet with Hans and our team and make sure that if you're moving forward here, you know what you're getting into and you've had a chance to talk it face to face with somebody, look at existing opportunities or look at the process for building your own and start to think through what those steps are going to look like. And so if you are interested in that, space is really tight on that. We're almost full on that. So you can go to our website, our digital summit, our new investor summit and workshop. It comes with digital content in addition to that, but the real time crunch is the summit next week. It's next Friday, which is May 24th. So if you're interested, it is kind of we're in the kind of the last week and a half before that event. So other than that, I think we've kind of covered everything, Hans. So if you are here this week, thanks for being here. And Hans, always thanks for being here on here and answering everybody's questions.
Awesome. Thank you for having me as always. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward. I'll be in Nashville next week. Let's go.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time, and we will see you all next week.